At 2:30 p.m., 49-year-old firefighter Danny Filippidis tells his buddies, "I'm gonna go ski down to grab my phone and take some photos." 6 days later, Danny calls his wife from Sacramento, California, 3,000 miles away, with no memory of how he got there. But the investigation into his journey would reveal something that defies every logical explanation. What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Welcome back. Please do me a quick favor. Let's try to get this over to 100 likes real quick, because I know I'm uploading this late for you guys, around 8:30 p.m. EST. Let me know in the comments if that works for you, or if you want it at 5:30 EST, 3:30 EST. Just let me know, and I love you. But without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Okay, so Danny Filippidis wasn't just some casual weekend skier. No, at 49, he was a 28-year veteran captain with Toronto Fire Rescue Services, a guy who had spent decades rescuing people from dangerous situations. He knew how to handle himself in very harsh conditions. And this was Danny's annual ski trip with his firefighter colleagues to Whiteface Mountain in Lake Placid, New York. I'm sure we've all seen the movie Lake Placid. That's fake in Michigan. This is the real Lake Placid. And the same trip they had been taking for years. February 7th was brutally cold, but Danny had been skiing in way worse before. So around 2:30 p.m. that Wednesday afternoon, the group was, winding down their day, just going on the slopes, having a great time. They were relaxing at the mid-station lodge about halfway up the mountain when Danny realized he had forgotten something. Because Danny wanted to document the end of their trip, but he had left his cell phone down in his car. "I'm gonna go ski down to grab my phone and take some photos," Danny told his friends. "I'll meet you guys back here." So Danny's colleagues just watched him towards the slopes with his ski gear and his little distinctive helmet. And that was the last time anyone would see Danny Filippidis on Whiteface Mountain. Now stay with me here. By 4:30 p.m., just 2 hours later, when the ski resort was closing, Danny still hadn't returned to his friends yet. So his colleagues scrambled their brains and they tried to check everywhere they could think of. The base lodge, the parking lots, and they found Danny's car still in the parking lot with his street shoes and personal belongings clearly inside through the window. But Danny was nowhere to be found. And by evening, his friends knew that something was seriously wrong. Danny wasn't the type to just wander off or miss a planned meeting, so they called 911. What followed was one of the largest search operations in Adirondack history. New York State Police, Department of Homeland Security, Border Patrol, Forest Rangers, search dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging, anything you can imagine, they were searching with it. And more than 135 people would spend a combined 7,000 hours searching for firefighter Danny. The search teams, they used every resource available. Canine units tracked scents. Helicopters with thermal imaging scoured the mountains from above. Volunteers combed through dense woods and steep terrain in sub-zero temperatures. They had to find this guy. But unfortunately, for 6 days, they found absolutely nothing. And then comes February 13th. Around midday, day 6 of the search. Danny's wife, Constantina, was at home in Toronto, waiting for news that seemed to be getting worse each day. When the phone rang that Tuesday, she almost didn't have the strength and the nerve to answer it. She was afraid that her worst fears would be acknowledged. But she picked up the phone, and the voice on the other end was weak and confused, but she did recognize it immediately.
"It's me. I don't know where I am."
And when Danny used a private nickname that only the two of them knew, Constantina realized that she wasn't dreaming. It was actually him. But Danny wasn't calling from New York. He was calling from Sacramento, California. "Danny, how did you get to California?" And Danny just says, "I don't know." I don't remember anything. He was 3,000 miles away from where he had vanished without remembering anything. So, when Sacramento County Sheriff's deputies responded to Danny's 911 call, they found him wandering around a rental car area of Sacramento International Airport. But hold on, because it gets really strange. And by the end of this, I'm going to ask all of you a serious question. Deputy Sean Hampton said Danny was clearly disorientated and in need of medical attention now. But what struck him and everyone was what he was actually wearing. Guys, this might give you the chills, but Danny was still dressed in the exact same ski clothing that he had worn 6 days earlier on Whiteface Mountain in New York. Seriously, his winter jacket, his ski boots, his helmet and goggles in California in February. Danny had his credit card, the same one he'd bought to pay for his lift pass the day on the mountain. But he had no identification, no passport, and no memory of how the heck he got there. But there is one detail that is different. And that only thing different was that somehow he had gotten a haircut and bought a new iPhone. This is literally stranger than fiction. And when Danny was interviewed by investigators, he could only remember fragments of what happened. You see, he had believed that he had taken a wrong turn while skiing back at his car and suffered a bad fall. And when he came to, he said he was cold and sore and couldn't find anybody around. And right there, that's when Danny's memory becomes a series of disconnected pieces that need to be fit back together like a puzzle to figure out what actually happened. He did remember flagging down a truck hoping to get a ride off the mountain. The next thing he recalled was climbing into the warm cab of a big rig, still wearing his ski boots and winter clothing. Then Danny remembered being violently sick by the side of the road, what appeared to be a truck stop. He remembered the crushing headaches and intense fatigue that he felt, and he was barely able to stay conscious at this point. But most clearly, he remembered learning they were driving through Utah. I'd never been out that way, Danny told reporters later. It kind of added to my confusion and feeling of not knowing what was really going on because I'm not familiar with that part of the country. So, as you could imagine, New York State Police launched a massive investigation to trace Danny's route across the country. They contacted hundreds of trucking companies, asking if any drivers remember picking up a man in ski gear in upstate New York. And despite massive media coverage at the time and appeals from law enforcement, no truck driver ever came forward. So what'd they do? Well, they pulled highway camera footage along every major route between Lake Placid and Sacramento. And Danny appeared on none of it. So they checked airline records, bus schedules, train manifest. Danny's name appeared nowhere. Major John Tibbetts of New York State Police told reporters, "We're very interested in any possible trucking company that would have come through this area." But you know what? They found nothing. Okay, so back in California, doctors who examined Danny concluded that he had suffered from some type of head injury while skiing. Now, of course, this theory made perfect sense, and Dr. Charles Tater, director of Canadian Concussion Center at Toronto Western Hospital, explained that amnesia occurs in about 25% of concussion cases, which that seems high, doesn't it? I never knew that. But headaches, fatigue, nausea, and islands of memory are all classic symptoms, Dr. Tater said. But you see, that medical explanation did not account for the impossible journey. Because even patients with severe brain injuries don't typically travel 3,000 miles across international borders while leaving absolutely no digital footprint. So, 3 sets of neurological tests in Toronto confirmed Danny had suffered a head injury. But doctors could not explain how someone in that condition could have navigated such a complex journey. So the medical evidence supported Danny's amnesia from the head concussion, but it could not explain his transportation. But here's what makes Danny's case so deeply disturbing. In 2018, it should be impossible to travel 3,000 miles across America without leaving one trace. Because remember guys, every highway has cameras, every border crossing is monitored, every credit card transaction is logged, and every cell phone pings towers. And somehow Danny left no digital footprint at all. Sacramento Sheriff Sergeant Sean Hampton said deputies believe Danny had spent at least one night somewhere along Interstate 5 before reaching the airport, but there's no record of where. Investigators also determined Danny had somehow gotten a haircut and purchased an iPhone with his credit card, but they couldn't trace where these transactions occurred. How is that possible? It was truly like Danny had become invisible for 6 days. The truck driver who supposedly transported him across multiple states never came forward despite massive publicity. No truck stop workers remembered him. No hotel clerks recalled checking him in. And you gotta think, this is a man in full ski gear, traveling thousands of miles, remembered by no one. After being dropped in Sacramento, Danny remembered wandering around the city, trying to figure out how to contact his wife. So he actually did manage to buy an iPhone, though several stores were reluctant to sell someone without identification. And when he finally got the phone working, Danny couldn't immediately remember his wife's phone number. And that's when Danny went online and made a shocking discovery. "I ended up on the internet," Danny told reporters months later. "I think that's when I came to the realization that I was a missing person." Online, Danny saw the news stories about the massive search operation on Whiteface Mountain. Pictures of himself, appeals from his family, search teams combing the mountain that he had vanished from 6 days earlier. Imagine seeing that and being like, what? He was literally reading about his own disappearance while standing exactly about 3,000 miles away. So, Danny returned to Toronto and underwent extensive medical testing. Doctors confirmed he had suffered a concussion but found no lasting physical damage. Amen. Psychologically, however, Danny has changed. He gave one exclusive interview to Canadian press reporter Michelle McQuigg, sorry if I butchered your name, and then refused all further media requests. There is a lot that he's had to resign himself to the fact that he simply will not know, McQuigg said. Danny returned to work as a captain with Toronto Fire Services, but colleagues noticed he was more private, more withdrawn. The case officially remains unsolved. New York State Police determined no crimes were committed and they closed their investigation. But they never found the truck driver, they never traced Danny's route, and they never explained how he crossed the country invisibly. Dr. Tater explained that Danny's amnesia would likely be permanent. He will probably forever have those blanks, the neurosurgeon said. But maybe that's not entirely true. In his interview with Michelle, Danny described one moment of perfect clarity during his 6-day journey. The moment when the truck driver told him they were passing through Utah. Just imagine that replaying in your mind. That's all you remember. We're passing through Utah. And Danny said, once again, I've never been out that way, so it kind of added to my confusion. I mean, think about that. Danny was confused about being in Utah specifically because he had never been there before. Which means, stay with me here, Danny's brain was still processing geography, still making logical connections, still aware enough to recognize he was somewhere where he shouldn't be, somewhere impossible. So what happened to that awareness during the rest of the journey? Well, 3 years later, Danny Filippidis continues working as a Toronto Fire Service captain. The massive search operation has been forgotten. The media has moved on to other stories like always. But the fundamental question remains unanswered. How does a man vanish from a New York mountain and appear in California with no digital trace in this digital age? How does someone travel 3,000 miles across multiple states while being seen by no one and remembered by no one? How does a truck driver who transported a man in ski gear for thousands of miles simply just not exist? The official explanation is that Danny suffered a concussion and traveled in a fugue state. But fugue states don't make people invisible to highway cameras. They don't erase credit card transaction records. And they certainly don't make truck drivers just vanish from existence. Because if someone or something has the capability to bypass every layer of America's surveillance infrastructure to move a person across the country while leaving no digital footprint whatsoever, then we're dealing with technology and resources far beyond what any civilian organization possesses. The question isn't just where Danny was for those 6 days. The question is, who has that kind of power? And what else are they capable of? Danny Filippidis spent 6 days somewhere between New York Mountain and a California airport. Where he was and how he got there remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of modern times. Because in a world where privacy has been destroyed and every moment is tracked and recorded, Danny managed to become invisible. And that should terrify all of us. Now, depending upon what you actually think happened, I want you to think about this before you comment. Of course, hit that like button right away. But do you think Danny could have went through a time slip, a time portal, a vortex? Or do you think it could have been our friends up in the sky? Either way, I don't know. I'm torn on this one, guys. I really don't know which direction to go. Whether it's portal, time slip, UFO. I mean, 3,000 miles, that makes me think UFO, but then again, I don't know. But I want to know what you think it is. So please let me know right now. And guys, thank you so much for listening, but get ready for Hell Month because October's going to depend on you. Right? You're getting at least 8 stories, double the output, but you could get triple. Every video I put out, if it hits over 100 likes in the first 2 days, you will get an extra story that week. So if you want to make 8 stories into 12, it's all up to you. That's all I got for you guys today. And if you want to see a similar story that is so similar it's crazy about this guy named Steven, then click this one right here. And I guarantee you the parallels will drive you absolutely crazy. I'll see you next time. Cheers.